Welcome to the Pinpoint Sports Podcast. My name is Eric Bruton. We've got a lot to discuss. Coming off of a great sports weekend, playoff baseball is. If you're like me and you grew up as a kid loving baseball and particularly loving playoff baseball, this past weekend was just a reminder of why you loved it. The Mets and the Phillies, both of those games and the first two games of that NLDS series were tremendous. Uh, just great playoff baseball action. Huge upset in college football that I really want to touch on here in a couple of seconds. Vanderbilt just shocking the world by upsetting Alabama and Nashville over the weekend. And then the NFL season is a quarter of the way through. Some interesting things going on right there. We'll touch on that a little bit. First, I'd like to ask you guys to like and subscribe to the channel. This will be a great place where we can keep in touch with each other and just talk all things sports. Leave comments in the comment section. I will respond back to you. I love the conversation. Like to build a little community here, so just do that and we'll keep in touch with each other. If you've been living under a rock since Saturday, then you're not aware of the huge upset that took place in college football over the weekend. Vanderbilt, the perennial doormat in the Southeastern Conference, as far as football is concerned, pulled off the major upset, beating number one Alabama in Nashville over the weekend. And welcome to the world of Scrutiny, Kalen, DeBoer. Like this is what everybody signs up for when they decide to become the head coach of the University of Alabama. And now Kalen DeBoer finds himself in the midst of all of it. Alabama coming off of a win for the ages against of the other perennial SEC powerhouse in Georgia. And quite honestly, they just did not look like they were ready to play against Vanderbilt on Saturday. That's taking nothing away from Vanderbilt. They all credit due to the Commodores. They did everything they needed to do to win that game, and they deserve all of the credit. But Alabama just looked like they were still on a high from beating Georgia the week before, and they just could not come down from it. And that's the kind of stuff that, quite frankly, gets you fired when you're the head guy in Tuscaloosa. You know, it may not get you fired in some other places. It certainly wouldn't have gotten Kalen DeBoer fired in Seattle, Washington, had he chose to stay there and continue to coach the Washington Huskies. But that's the kind of stuff that gets you fired in Tuscaloosa, because especially now coming off of the 17 seasons that fan base had with Nick Saban and all of the success and playing for a national championship literally every single year. I heard this insane stat that, Alabama's finished in the top 10 the last 16 years, which is ridiculous. Anything short of that from the new guy will get you run. And Kalen DeBoer is in a position right now, even in his first year, where there will be no honeymoon period, even in his first year. He has to play for the national championship. He has to get Alabama in the playoff and be right there near the end, or else this is not going to be good enough. 8 wins, 9 wins in that job is just not, it's not sustainable. And you hear it from the fan base already. People, complaining about how lackluster that team looked, which they did. But you're going to have games like that. All programs have games like that. It's unacceptable at Alabama. I don't buy into this notion that Alabama is completely different from any like there's pressure to win in other places too. There's pressure to win there's pressure to win national championships in other places too. Like, Ohio State's ready to fire Ryan Day every year. And he hasn't won a national championship. So there's pressure there. Michigan, a place who, 30 years ago or 40 years ago when Bo Schembechler was there, their fan base was okay with just winning the Big Ten and going to the Rose Bowl every year. Not the case anymore. Sharon Moore, if he doesn't have this team competing and in a position to where they can win a national championship in the next couple of years, his own, and not, riding the coattails of Jim Harbaugh, then he's going to find himself in trouble. It's just that at Alabama, it's just on a completely different level. And again, this is what Kalen DeBoer is going to find. Now, it's why Saban is, I think, the greatest coach in the history of the sport. he surpassed Bear Bryant a long time ago in my mind. And for what he did, the consistency year in and year out. And quite honestly, I think that's why Saban felt like now was the perfect time to exit the stage, just simply because it's harder to do it now in this era with NIL and the transfer portal. And if the Alabama fan base were reasonable, they would understand that it's difficult to do it now in this era of the transfer portal and NIL. They're not a reasonable bunch, and I say that with all due respect, but they're just not. They think it's their birthright to win the national championship every year, and it's not. Notre Dame is a place where that fan base, at least I think they used to feel like it was their birthright to win the national championship every year, and they found out since 1988 it's not. And I sit here today, I wouldn't be surprised if Notre Dame never won another national championship, because the landscape is just different now than what it was 30 years ago. Good luck convincing Alabama fans of that, because they just saw Saban do this. And they feel like if Saban can do it, anybody can do it. And that's just simply not the case. You look at the history of that university. I mentioned Bear Bryant. If Saban's not the greatest college coach in the history of the sport, then the Bear can certainly lay claim to it with all of the success that he had there. But if you look at all of the guys in between, Ray Perkins was an alum there. Ray Perkins was the guy who replaced Bear Bryant in Tuscaloosa, an alum, one of Bryant's favorite players. Ray Perkins left the New York Giants, who eventually became a Super Bowl champion in the 1980s. He left being the head coach of the New York Giants to come back home and coach Alabama. And after 4 years, he said that was enough. He had to get out so bad, he went and decided he wanted to go coach the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And these are the sorry-ass Tampa Bay Buccaneers in the popsicle jerseys from the 80s that everybody remembers. Ray Perkins had to get out of there. They hired Bill Curry. Bill Curry was 11-1 and played in a Sugar Bowl and lost to the eventual national champion, the Miami Hurricanes, in 1989. That was not good enough. They ran him out of there. They replaced him with Gene Stallings. Gene Stallings won a national championship in 1992. 4 years later, they were running him out of there. And then they fell into this abyss with guys like Mike DeBoer and Mike Shula and all of these guys who just could not cut it. God knows what they would have done if they wouldn't have found Saban. And they didn't come to Saban at a time when he himself was desperate after having just failed with the Miami Dolphins and needing very much so to get back into the college game, which was his element. But that's just the way it is at that place. That fan base is just not going to settle for anything other than excellence. 9-3, 8-4. It's just not going to cut it anymore, man. And especially now as well with this expanded playoff where 12 teams get in, it's not going to be good enough. And it's interesting to see what's going to happen going forward with them because, they got a tough schedule still. In 2 weeks, they got Tennessee. They go to Oklahoma. This expanded SEC is more of a minefield. And there are questions about them for as talented they are in some spots and as great as Jalen Milroe looked in that Georgia game. He has his hit and misses. He didn't look great against Central Florida earlier this year when they struggled. Go back to last year. There were games where he struggled offensively. He can be great at times, and then he could be so-so. So, this is the world that Kalen DeBoer is now inhabited. And hopefully for him, he understood that this was the world that he was going to inhabit when he took this job. It's interesting to me. These guys are interesting. DeBoer and guys like him. Had he stayed at Washington, he would have been a king. Somebody told me he was 25-3 his entire time at Washington, and that would have been enough for the people in Seattle. That we win the Pac-10 not the Pac-10 anymore, but we're competitive in the Big Ten. We win it every now and then. We play for a national championship every now and then. We win 9, 10, 11 games every year. That would have been more than fine for the people in Seattle. And he traded that for a place where, if you win, it's the highest of highs. But anything below that is not good enough. And I know there are financial considerations that come with coaching Alabama. I know the glory that comes with winning in Alabama, but there's also that. I look at a guy like Tom Herman, who was at the University of Houston and was, again, having a great run. And, winning 9, 10, 11 games every year at the University of Houston would have been fine for the alum and would have been fine for the people in that city. I mean, he leaves, he decides to go to Texas. All of a sudden, he finds out it's not good enough. It's not good enough. And Texas is one of those programs like Michigan, like Ohio State, like USC. You would see USC's having their struggles out there now. It's just not good enough to be competitive. You have to win, and you have to win at the highest levels. And, good luck to Kalen, because he's in that situation now where it just, he's got to win. He's got to get to the point this year where Alabama's at least in the playoff. And that is no guarantee, man. The SEC is loaded. The SEC's loaded. I mean, you look at Tennessee losing to Arkansas on Saturday night. Who saw that coming? Georgia, after losing to Alabama, they came back home and they struggled for 3 quarters against Auburn, a mediocre Auburn team, by the way. Texas is good, but Texas hasn't played anybody yet. We'll see where they are in a couple of weeks when they play at Oklahoma in Dallas. Nothing's guaranteed. And unfortunately for Kalen DeBoer, nothing's guaranteed. Who knows where we're going to be, a couple of years from now. Because I don't think, certainly he's not going to get to the level of Nick Saban, but will he find himself in that position of, Ray Perkins and Gene Stallings, where he either has to leave or they force him out? We'll see. It'll be interesting to see. The other thing that I wanted to touch on really quickly was some of the things that were going on in the NFL over the past weekend. And the NFL is real interesting to me right now because, again, it's one of those things where if everybody were being honest with itself, it's a lot of mediocre football being played. I think if you look around the league yesterday, quarterbacks played a lot better than they have been. You had that shootout in Cincinnati yesterday between Lamar Jackson and Joe Burrow, where both quarterbacks were just in their bag. It was just a great game. But for the most part, man, you got a lot of mediocre football, and because of that, it's led to a situation where you don't know who's really good, you don't know who's really bad. I mean, that Sunday night game last night, I think we all, not all of us, but a lot of us jumped out in front of our skis as it relates to the Pittsburgh Steelers. We got seduced by that 3-0 start. We got seduced by Justin Fields not really playing great, but not making mistakes, not turning the football over. And we got caught up in how good that defense was over the first 3 weeks of the season. The last 2 weeks of the season, that defense has been terrible. They weren't statistically bad last night against the Cowboys, but they gave it up at a time when they really didn't need to give it up. They gave up a game-winning drive when they really needed to be what they are, which is the best unit of that football team. And they didn't make a play. The week before, they just got ran through by the Indianapolis Colts, by Joe Flacco, the ghost of Joe Flacco. And he went right through him like a hot knife through butter. So the Steelers are one of those enigmas in a league that has a lot of enigmas. The team that they lost to last night, the Dallas Cowboys. We were saying 15 days ago after they got embarrassed at home by the Baltimore Ravens that this was the end of their season. And you come off of a Thursday night game where they barely got a win against the New York Giants. You lose a couple of key defensive players. You're out there on offense with Dak Prescott basically being your lone offensive weapon along with he and CeeDee Lamb. But they gutted one out last night, and they got themselves to 3-2 with 3 road wins. I mean, if you'd have said at the end of the first quarter pole, if you'd have said back in August at the quarter pole of the season, the Dallas Cowboys would be 3-2 with 3 road wins, they would have taken that. Anybody would have taken that. And now here they are. As bad as they looked against Baltimore, as bad as they looked against the Saints at home, and with a stiff schedule in front of them, yeah, they'd have taken being 3-2. Because that's just where the league is now. The Buffalo Bills, we got seduced by their 3-0 start. And all of a sudden, the last 2 weeks, they've looked terrible, getting blown out by Baltimore on the road. A game yesterday where they inexplicably gave the Houston Texans an opportunity to win that game with 16 seconds left. If Sean McDermott didn't have the pedigree that he has in terms of the success that team's had over there, he would have got fired yesterday. That was a fireable offense in terms of terrible clock management. I mean, that was just bad. And they gave a game away. And now they're 3-2, and we're questioning how good they really are. The Baltimore Ravens, who looked bad their first 2 games of the season, including inexplicably losing at home to the Las Vegas Raiders. And now all of a sudden, it appears that they've righted themselves. They've gotten back to 3-2. They won that shootout yesterday, which also just goes to show you how close and how thin the margin of error is for all of these teams. Because, if the Cincinnati Bengals if the Cincinnati Bengals holder gets down a hole for the field goal kicker, the Ravens lose that game, the Bengals win that game. Now the Bengals are 2-3 instead of 1-4, and the outlook on them is completely different. The Ravens are now 2-3, and the outlook on them is completely different. It's just how thin the margin for error is for all of these teams in this league, and it's just amazing to me. The Cincinnati Bengals, I mentioned 1-4, but again, the holder gets a snap down, kicker kicks a field goal, that's a win. If the refs, who we've seen them many, many times, and I'm not saying it was a bad call in that Kansas City game, but I've seen the refs stick the flag in their pocket. So if the refs stick that flag in their pocket on that pass interference call at the end of that game on Kansas City, they win that game. Now all of a sudden, they're 3-2 instead of 1-4. Like that, and that's huge, especially in that division that's so jumbled up and nobody's running away with. That's a big difference. So it just goes to show you, man, again, how close this league is, the fact that there isn't a juggernaut in this team, and the fact that even some of the bad teams, or the teams that we list as being bad, Cincinnati 1-4, they're still in this thing. Like it's where we are. It's mediocre football. It's the product that we love, and there's nothing that the NFL could do to ever make the public not show up en masse on Sunday and Monday night and Thursday night and watch these games. But it's really not aesthetically pleasing football, and that's the thing that I find fascinating, just absolutely fascinating. But that's just my take on things. Again, you guys like and subscribe to the channel. I love to hear from you. Leave comments in the comment section. I'll be checking in with you guys. Really appreciate it. We'll see you in a couple of days.